The Citroen DS is a legend, and for good reason. But legends often come wrapped in a lot of hype. Surely, if it had been so perfect, we would all be driving Citroens today. Instead, the brand is not even in the world's top 20 in terms of sales and only accounts for 1% of overall car production in the world. Some of you might say it's unfair to judge Citroen today on what it did then, but there is some logic in my reasoning. In this video, I'm going to tell you what makes the DS so revolutionary, but I'm also going to tell you the crucial mistakes that were made that stopped it from taking over the world as it should have. It was launched at the 1955 Paris Motor Show and it caused absolute pandemonium. Citroen took 80,000 orders for the DS at the show alone. Now that's a record that was only broken in 2017 by Tesla with the Model 3. Doesn't sound like a flawed car, right? But bear with me. To understand what Citroen got wrong, first you need to know what they got so right. 1955 was the space age. We thought that through atomic power we would have limitless energy. The future looked unstoppable, and the DS fit that mood perfectly. It looked like it had landed from another planet. It was the first production car to successfully use hydropneumatic suspension and disc brakes. And at the front, they were even mounted inboard to reduce unsprung mass. And that suspension system wasn't just for comfort. Because it was fully hydraulic, it also powered the steering, the brakes, and even Citroen's quirky semi-automatic gearbox. You didn't drive a DS, you piloted it. The aerodynamics were just as advanced. You can see how slippery the shape is, but on top of that, very unusually for the time, the whole bottom of the car was smoothed over. This allowed them to have a CD of just 0.36. Better than many cars that came 30 years after. The roof was made of fiberglass to lower the centre of gravity. The single spoke steering wheel was designed with safety in mind. This is the central position. If you had a crash, it was made so that it would buckle towards the centre of the car, drawing you away from the dangerous side. Also, the engine itself was made in such a way that it should submarine under the car in the event of a crash. And the bodywork panels were all bolted onto a central structure, meaning that a damaged wing could just be removed and replaced in minutes. That suspension was so clever, you could even drive the DS on 3 wheels. It wasn't just a party trick either, it actually saved lives, including that of French President Charles de Gaulle. Once, when a roadside bomb blew the car right across the road, and another time when a hail of bullets shredded the tyres. And in both cases, the car just kept on going. So why didn't it take over the world? Well, for one thing, for the first 3 years of sale, they weren't really that reliable. And this was made worse because garages had no idea how to work on them, leaving owners stranded while mechanics scratched their heads. And then there was the price. At launch, it was 70% more expensive than the Traction Avant, which it replaced. Citroen were even forced to launch a pared-down version in 1957. The ID had a simplified gearbox, no power steering, and a slightly detuned engine. Citroen had dreamed of giving it a brand new flat-six engine, but they ran out of money, so instead, it got a 4-cylinder, which dated back to 1934 and the Traction Avant. In the original guise, the 1.9 made just 75 horsepower. Here, it's 2.1 litre fuel injected, puts out a much more respectable 139 horses. But this unit, being so old, was still never refined enough to live up to the rest of the car. The power plant was especially problematic in the US, where buyers could get a 360 horsepower V8 for the same money. No wonder it was a flop there. To tell you about the last problem, I need to first show you how it drives. The moment that I got in and sat in this car, I couldn't believe. I almost feel like I'm a part of it. I love it so much. It's just unbelievable just sitting in it. These chairs are the most, and they are chairs, not seats. They're the most comfortable that I have ever experienced. And the way you have this wrap-around screen right in front of you, the visibility is incredible. I mean, I just love it. Well, let's start it up. This one doesn't have the semi-automatic clutchless gearbox. This is a standard box, albeit it is column mounted. So move it up to the top, first gear, and then we're off. Well, even at these slower speeds, you can feel that that engine is lacking. It's not power so much. 139 horsepower is okay, particularly for this era. It's actually not pretty good. But what it is that it's just lacking refinement. And there's a lot of vibration coming through. Even at 3,000 revs, you can tell it doesn't particularly want to rev. That is not its thing. I mean, I did tell you earlier, that was one of the big failings, is that the engine caused a lot of problems for this car, and I can see why. And bear in mind as well that this is, you know, a later fuel injected, much better, more powerful version, and you can imagine how much the original cars were hampered by having this and not a decent lump in there. But still, the engine doesn't take away from how special a DS is. The steering is unbelievably light, and it's so bizarre that you have the steering wheel and the standard position for the straight ahead is that it's just canted off to the side. The ride is sublime, and of course it would be. Even Rolls-Royce ended up licensing this system for cars that they used over 20 years in the 70s, in the 80s and the 90s. It is an exceptionally good system. It does mean that you do feel a little bit like you're at sea. It never quite stops moving, and that is something that I think some people wouldn't tolerate. Most of us would get used to and end up appreciating, but certainly it's not natural to be in a car which is in constant movement. Kind of goes with that idea that you're piloting it more like a ship, because it's as if it was on water in some ways. To be honest, most boats and ships, as long as the water's calm, are more stable. God, it deals with the bumps. There's a nasty little bump at the bottom of that ridge there, and with many cars you get a horrible bit of shake in there. This goes through, you hardly feel it. Now this is where I normally take cars through the gears. I'm going to be gentle on the goddess. It's not a bolt of lightning, but it's completely fine. You'd be able to keep up with modern traffic. It doesn't feel slow as such. It's just that the engine doesn't feel pleasant. I revved it, I think, up to close to 5,000. The red line is at about 6. No point in going up there. It is a torquey engine, which works quite well with the nature of the car. So 2,000 revs, put your foot down in fourth, and it responds quite eagerly. But yeah, the engine doesn't sound good. It's quite harsh. There's not that many good things to say about it. Now, it does wallow in the corners, but it's incredibly grippy. I think a lot of people are put off by the fact that it leans so much, but if you can put up with that, you can actually go around corners at quite a lick. And look at the way it's demolishing this bit of road. The other good thing about it is that that suspension is so amazing that once you lob it in the corner, you don't really have to be worried about what the road is doing in terms of bumps or changes, because you know the suspension will sort it. You just set it up for the corner, let it glide through, and the car will do the rest. So this one is a 21 Pallas. The Pallas is the top of the range model. Actually, there was a Prestige on top. I'll talk about that in a second, but the Pallas was the top of the range. So you get this incredible leather interior. It's more luxurious. You get a more complete dash. This, by the way, is the facelifted dash, which I think came in '67. It also has, to me, the much prettier fared-in headlights, which also turn as you're turning around the corner, as you're turning a wheel. Something which modern cars didn't start to have as a common thing until about 10 or 15 years ago, and this had it in the 1970s. Just the DS is such an incredible thing. There was one rung up from the Pallas, and that was called the Prestige. That was actually slightly longer for more room at the back, and I think it was the car that President de Gaulle would have been using. It even had a wooden divider with a screen at the back. It was more like a limousine, but for normal people, this was the top of the range normal model, and it was enough. As we're coming here, the brakes, there's that little mushroom button at the bottom there, and you know, it does take some getting used to. I'm not going to lie to you. Oh, have I got it in first gear? I do now. Yeah, that little button, once you get used to it, it's all right, but there isn't much feel, and when you're not used to it, just get ready, because you're going to be face planting, because those brakes, they are just powerful. But then just think, at this point in time, 1955, the brakes on cars, they were not something you'd want to rely on because they were so poor. So I'd much rather have this, which took some getting used to and maybe was over-assisted for some people, rather than, you know, just brakes that didn't work at all, which was the norm in those days. Now, just for fun, I'm going to take it through those little sharp corners a little bit quicker. I want it to lean. I want to have that classic sort of Citroen DS feel through the bends. And again, brakes, hard to modulate. Oh, it goes in and it goes down. That front end really digs in. But you know, the grip is good. One thing that I will say about the steering, which I don't love, is just that there's a real hesitancy off center. It could also be because there's so much movement in the body that when you're turning, the car doesn't respond, because initially all it does is lean into the corner, and then once it's finished leaning, it sort of it goes off and follows what you're trying to tell it to do. But it is something that I don't particularly like. So off center, it's just incredibly vague. If you're trying to drive it quickly, that would get in the way. If you're piloting it normally, really, as you should, quite sedately, making the most of its incredible chassis refinement, then it's not such a bad thing. One final thing about the name, it has a wonderful pun about it, because in French, DS is pronounced DS, which is also their word for goddess, which I think is so appropriate for this. Now, by 1975, Citroen had managed to sell 1.4 million of these, which actually sounds pretty respectable, until you realise that 1.2 million of those were sold in France, so just 200,000 in the rest of the world. And I think that this perfectly illustrates the main problem that the DS had. It was just too French. It was too idiosyncratic to truly be a success, and unfortunately, it set Citroen down a path that it would never really recover from. It meant that eventually it was taken over by Peugeot. You know, I bow down to Citroen for having made this. It's brilliant for people like me that love cars like this. But ultimately, it wasn't really that good for Citroen. Driving it today has certainly made me think long and hard about buying one. I had a look last night, and it seems that prices range between sort of £5,000 for non-running projects to sort of 15 for running cars that might need a bit of attention, up to sort of 25, 30 for the very best examples. Now that's quite a lot of money, but these are such special cars. I am seriously considering getting one. The one thing that is holding me back is just the storage problem. I just don't like the idea of that, and my garage just isn't big enough for this and my Pantera, so I don't know, but it's such an awesome car. I really, really want one. Huge thanks to Felix for coming down today and bringing me his goddess. Now, if you enjoyed this, I'm sure that you will like the video I did on the CX Turbo Prestige, really the follow-up to this, so check it out. Thank you so much for watching, and see you for the next video.